2020, YouTube. Steve Shives, sir. Let me buy you a Canada Dry. While we are talking, let me offer you some free advice. Talk less. Smile more. Don't let them know what you're against or what you're for. You want to get ahead. Fools who runs their mouths off wind up canceled. What time is it? Showtime. I'm Zachrilege cast in the place to be. 2 pints of dragon's milk and I'm working on 3. He's not going to throw away his hat. He's not going to throw away his hat. Yo, he's just like his country. He's middle-aged, bearded, and race E. He's not going to throw away his hat. Steve has never been satisfied by a Mike Myers movie. And if it takes fighting a cultural war for us to meet, it will have been worth it. And Peggy. All right.
You really went for that. We did like the whole medley.
Yeah, it was almost like the what was it, the Hamilton song by God, I'm having trouble recalling names tonight. Weird Al Yankovic.
The polka, right? Yeah, the Hamilton polka, sure.
I don't think I'd listened to the entire thing when I first did it, but the best part of that whole thing was the and Peggy thing.
Yeah,
because
like a fart sound, I know. Like,
because the weird thing, I mean, obviously, Hamilton, not exactly 100% fictionally, or historically accurate.
No.
And the fact that the Schuyler family had like 75 kids, like every family back then.
Yeah.
And a bunch of sons. And then they got rid of all the sons and like, well, what about the Peggy? I don't even know. Like, I hope the actress was playing like some other roles, but it's like they refer to Peggy and then, out. You're gone after that one scene.
Yeah. She also played Mariah Reynolds, the woman who Hamilton had an affair with. So.
Yeah, there was some good, multiple casting for people.
Yeah.
And it really was because it had the intermission and it had like the two halves. Like, kind of all the friends that he had, even the ones who didn't die, they were gone in Act 2 and they had to play out the characters. So
they all turned heel on him. They switched sides, except for the son. The son, Lawrence came back as the son, but
spoiler alert, everybody.
Sorry,
you should have seen it by now. It's been 3 days.
Like, yeah, God,
like the only summer movie we have is a musical that has been out for 5 years.
A 4-year-old recording of a musical, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the weird thing was they bought it, and then they were going to make it like next summer, and they were like, "Okay, we'll put it out this summer." Although
the world needs it.
It doesn't necessarily fit in with Disney in a way because like they do like edit out the F word, although it really is only in there like twice.
They cut it.
He does the whole thing, which is funny. It happens. Oh boy. Anyway, yeah, we'll have to. And if you get the free preview, you don't get it, so you have to pay for Disney Plus and 75 other streaming services.
They know a hook when they've got one.
I know. You have to have something big come every few months, and we might as well get back to normal show. So yes, welcome back to the Zachrilege cast. I won't do the gong because me singing is and I mean that's. We're gonna come up after being at the very bottom of everything. But welcome back, Steve Shives. Some people have one name like Cher, but you get 2.
Well, because there's too many Steves, so you got to throw in a little bit of something a little more specific.
Yeah, but we'll throw a few out of context quotes because last time I think I in context quoted you, and that's no fun. So, well, actually, the first one's not out of context. I am endlessly charmed by my cat.
That is true.
And if you don't Instagram, because I don't really follow Steve on Facebook or on Twitter, and you'll see he'll post the pictures of his cat because, there's nothing more magical than catching your cat in mid-yawn and getting a picture of it because it seems like it never happens, but then you get it. Because that we yawn like 8 billion times a day,
and it looks like a mighty roar. It looks like she's a fierce lion, and actually she's just yawning.
Yeah, that is totally accurate. Okay, so a couple more out of context quotes. Don't look at the pee-pee.
That's always good advice.
And what are you going to do with that crucifix?
Which is an open-ended question that I mean, a lot of us have had to face in the past.
So Steve hasn't already regretted being back. There you go. So we'll start because we like to throw softball questions when we're in our echo chamber of fun.
Appreciate it.
What was it like for you getting your major award for having 100,000 YouTube subscribers? Oh, it's right behind you. Look at that.
It's right behind me in a in a place of honor, propped up on the empty desk behind me. It was cool, actually. I was very ambivalent about it in a way because YouTube doesn't really have standards. So a lot of people who really like should not ever be given any kind of award ever have one. So I'm not always in the best company. But on the other hand, I was like, I mean, I've been doing this for almost 10 years, for 10 years now. And I mean, it was cool. It was nice, But see, the thing about it is YouTube, like they don't just send it to you. They make you ask for it. Like they send you get a notification.
They make you wait for it.
Oh. Yeah, they make you wait for it. You get a notification, and then it's like, do you want it? And then you have to say, yes, I want it. So you have to sort of admit, like, I guess this must mean something to me, because it's not like it just shows up in the mail and you're like, oh, whatever, no big deal. Like I asked them to send it to me.
So have any of the kind of centrist alt-right people like actually set their 100,000 subscriber on fire? Like when they started banning people like Stephen Molyneux and was it Gavin McInnes and a bunch of other people who have been terrible for as long as you've been doing a show?
Gosh, I hope so. I don't know if any of them have burned their silver play buttons in protest, but I like to think so. Sure. I mean, they do seem to really enjoy like futile demonstrations of, defiance. Like they do these symbolic things. Like what was it last year when the place in London started selling vegan sausage rolls, and like for some reason this annoyed people, and they like went and they bought the vegan sausage rolls, and there was a guy who had like a video on Twitter where he filmed himself with his phone through the entire process, where he gets to the front of the line, he goes in, he buys the sausage roll, pays for it, walks right outside and throws it in the trash. And the shop replied and said, thanks for giving us money for the sausage roll. Like, we don't care what you do with it after you leave. You bought it from us. Thank you very much.
It's like giving people money to own the libs, or
I don't know.
Much of these examples, like the burning of the sports jersey. Well, usually people burn like the sports jersey of a guy who left the team, so they've already bought it. But it's like, buying a Colin Kaepernick jersey just to burn it. I don't know about that.
Yeah. Like I'm pretty sure Kaepernick doesn't care. It's not like he's like like balled up in a fetal position at the bottom of his shower crying because some racist shithead burned his jersey. I don't think he cares.
Yeah, he's like a rare leftist activist who's actually making a living off this and not getting paid by George Soros. Well, it could be happening.
We never know.
So the first time you're on, and this is, I feel like there's sometimes where I don't get someone on for 4 years. In this case, it was, I think, February of last year. So, not too bad, not too shabby. No. So this is Steve Shives 201. That was 101. So, do a refresher course and get caught up, people. I'm not asking about the freaking hat again. So
no.
We didn't really talk about the podcast side of you last time. So Why don't we, since we mentioned Mike Myers, why don't we talk about late seating and your co-hosts? So how did this podcast start? Because I believe you're on 139, so you've done quite a few episodes of that.
Yeah, for late seating, yeah. The podcasts were the creation of my partner and my really he's become my best friend, Jason Harding, and who is just so funny. So he's a writer and an actor, and he has a YouTube channel that he hasn't he hasn't worked on for a while, but he has a YouTube channel called Opinionville that is just brilliant and hilarious. And we met through both having a YouTube channel and having similar points of view and similar interests. We both like superheroes and comics and Star Trek and stuff like that. And we just became really good friends. And he, I guess, God, it's been 5 years ago, I guess, or something like that. It's been a while. He said he started doing podcasts, and he did the first one that he still does with another good friend of his, Atticus. And they started doing their podcast, and it was going really well, and he was really enjoying it. And he said to me, "Do you want to do like a movie show?" And at first we did it on YouTube, and then he switched it to a podcast. And he's, and it's called Late Seating, and we review movies that are at least 10 years old, and they can be good movies, they can be bad movies, as long as they're movies that have a certain reputation that like people would recognize. If I mentioned the title to you, like you would know what movie I'm talking about, and we give them a fresh view, and sometimes they're movies that he and I have seen ourselves a bunch of times, and we're watching them for the millionth time. And the really interesting ones are the ones where I'm watching it for the first time, where I haven't actually seen the movie before, even though it's like a very well-known movie in the culture. And it's a great show to do. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I've always had kind of a movie critic side of me, and I've always tried to do a little bit of that in my YouTube stuff now and then. But yeah, it's a ton of fun. And we make fun of the movies, whether we like them or not. And one of my favorite things about our show is that I feel like it's not always possible to tell, unless we let it slip intentionally. It's not always possible to tell until we get to the second part of the show, where we actually do our review, whether we genuinely like the movie or not. Especially with Jason, because when we're going through when we go through our plot summary and we're making fun of the movie, even if it's a movie he really likes, he can be just merciless and finds like the most cutting jokes to make at the expense of the movie. So you can't even really tell until we actually get to sharing our honest opinion, what we think of the movie. But yeah, it's a great experience to do, and I'm really, really proud of it. And then we also do the Star Trek podcast, the unofficial Star Trek podcast, called CBS doesn't pay us to do it. But it's called the Ensign's Log, and that's completely different, where we're not even playing ourselves. We're playing fictional characters that are serving aboard the classic Star Trek version of the Enterprise, and sort of having our own mundane existence. Not so mundane. We get into some pretty wacky stuff, but while the events of Star Trek, the original series, are happening around us. And that has been so much fun. So yeah.
Now, while recording that one, do you wear a red shirt or not?
I don't. I actually have one. I have a costume. I have a costume for my character that I can wear if the need arises. But no, when we're recording, I don't. But yes,
that shirt is for Steve Shives 301, which you have to get a PhD.
Exactly.
And Steve Shives is actually Steve Shives Apologetics. So it's good stuff.
Yeah. When you hear all of my tired arguments, and then you learn how to refute them.
So do you alternate the show between like movies that you hate and love? Because it does seem, and I think we chatted about this a little bit before the show, was like, you don't want to do an hour and a half long podcast about a movie that you're meh about. You want to have strong opinions. And if you really hate it or you really love it, and yeah, you can say bad things about movies you love, and you can say good things about movies you hate. Not much, but a movie that you're like, yeah, that was 2 hours that I barely remember. You're not going to do that.
Luckily, I don't think we've ever run into that problem. But we don't intentionally alternate. In fact, for the last year or so, maybe a little longer, actually, I'm discovering my memory is really terrible about stuff like this. But we do the gimmick for the end of each episode of Late Seating to choose the next movie is Jason will offer me a blind choice of 3 movies, and I'll just have to pick A, B, or C. And Jason knows which movies are which, but I don't. So whatever I say, is the next movie that we do, and usually they have like a genre in common, and some of them are good movies and some of them are bad movies, and I have no idea which is which, so it's sort of up in the air. It's left to chance, and we have gone on streaks where I've picked like the worst movie of the bunch 3, 4, 5 times in a row. And Jason kind of goes like, oh, this was a terrible idea. Why did I make this part of the show? Yeah, I think we've broken it this time. The last movie we did, the most recent episode, was The Cat in the Hat, the live action Mike Myers Cat in the Hat. And then the next one we're doing is the classic Ingmar Bergman film, The Seventh Seal. So we're moving from a bad one to a good one this time, thankfully, but we don't do that intentionally. But like that's part of the, even if we did come up with a movie that both of us were just kind of meh on, I feel like part of our jobs as the hosts of the show is to find something interesting to say about it. And I feel like that's sort of part of your job as a critic is, even, and you don't want to just make stuff up. You want to be honest. You don't want to just say things for the sake of saying them, or else the show would be no good. But your job is to find something of value, that is at least worth sharing to the people listening. And I would like to think we could come up with something, even if it was a movie that we were both sort of just like, oh, like, what do we even say about this? Like, I don't like it. I don't hate it. It's just kind of there. Hopefully we could find something to say about it.
So was this your first time seeing Cat in the Hat?
Yes. Yeah.
And is Cat in the Hat, is that on Disney Plus? I was wondering like what streaming service it was on.
No, thankfully it's on Netflix, so I didn't have to pay to rent it. Some of the movies, a lot of the movies that we do are not up on one of the streaming services that I subscribe to as part of the subscription. So I rent a lot of movies on Amazon if I need to. And that's fine. I don't mind doing it. But yeah, it's nice because I kind of suspected going in that I wasn't going to enjoy The Cat in the Hat. Mm-hmm. And it was nice to see like, oh, okay, it's on Netflix. I don't have to pay extra for it,
That's true, because you see some movies, like I think it was Real Genius, like popped. I'm like, ooh, I'd like to see that. And it was like not on any streaming service. And I'm like, even though you might pay for multiple streaming services, like $4 to rent a movie. Come on, man.
Yeah.
It's 2020. This is not happening. So
what's my money going to? I mean,
you move on to something else. So is it possible to compare, since you've probably watched these both at the same time, your experience of watching Cat in the Hat versus your experience of watching Hamilton?
Oh God. Well, they both have songs. So there's that. They have that in common. They both made me want to cry for radically different reasons. Yeah, it's weird. It's like Hamilton is, and I'm a Hamilton super fan. So I as we were talking before we went on the air, like I am completely sympathetic to all the people who, since it came out on Disney Plus, are pointing out the problematic parts of it. Like that doesn't bother me at all. I'm not, against that or arguing, trying to refute that or anything. I think a lot of them have really good points. But to me, I think Hamilton is one of the great works of popular art of the last 50 years. And The Cat in the Hat is pretty much the exact opposite of that. I mean, it has no redeeming artistic value. It adds absolutely nothing of value to our culture. It is art in the broadest sense of the word, but it's not.
It's clearly like a blatant cash grab, because if you've read about Hamilton, you hear about like the actors, and they're like, oh yeah, we're off Broadway and we're making like $400 a week, which doing 8 shows a week, that's not big money. And then eventually some of them cashed in, but it's like, with something like that, it took a long time for that to happen. And Cat in the Hat clearly, and your show captures this pretty well, is a blatant cash grab. And it was such a bad movie that the widow of Dr. Seuss was like, no more live action movies based on books that are 2,000 words long, and we're going to make it into an 80-minute movie.
Yeah, that's
in the middle.
that was a bit of trivia that we talked about. Where the Cat in the Hat movie was so bad that Dr. Seuss's widow forbade any more live action movies to be made from his works. And I'll share with you and with your audience, because you listen to the show, so you already know. But my favorite bit of trivia about the Cat in the Hat movie is that somebody stole $50,000 worth of props from the movie. And the props were found weeks later in a dumpster with graffiti spray painted on them. So they didn't even steal it to sell or as collector's items. They broke onto the set of the Cat in the Hat and stole a bunch of random stuff and just vandalized it and threw it away. Oh, it's one of my favorite little bits of movie trivia that I've ever done for our show. Because it's like, so perfect.
I'm a fan of movies, and it's like, yeah, but it's Cat in the Hat, and you're like, okay, never mind. I was a kid. Not really happening. That is wild, though. It's probably more fun doing like research for a movie like that as opposed to the aspect of watching it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, it's one of those movies, and I mean, I've had this experience with good movies too, though, is that there are certain movies, for whatever reason, that are just more interesting to talk about than to watch. And sometimes they're good movies, and sometimes they're more often than not, they're bad movies, but they're bad movies that are bad, like in an interesting way. And it's just a lot more fun to talk about them than to sit there on the couch and have to sit through them. But Cat in the Hat is definitely one of those that it's like, it's way more fun to talk about. And honestly, if Jason and I were watching it together and we were like in the same room and we could riff on it like Mystery Science Theater, it would probably be a ball to watch. It would be a ton of fun to watch if you could make fun of it while you're watching it and just kind of, give it the treatment that it deserves. But no, watching it and trying to enjoy it on its own level, it didn't work for me. I'll say that. It didn't really do it for me.
So we'll switch 180 degrees to an enjoyable experience. So Hamilton. So it came out Friday, and I think they announced it like it wasn't even that long ago, maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah, something like that.
And I just knew it was like we actually switched carriers, and we had Verizon, which lets you get Disney, and we were able to get Disney right under the deadline before we switched over. So we were able to watch it. So was it like Friday you got to watch it finally?
Yeah, I watched it the first day. I watched it. I waited until the evening. I resisted the urge to watch it early in the day because my wife and I wanted to watch it together. And we didn't want to watch. And it didn't seem like a first thing in the morning kind of thing. It seemed like, let's watch like a Deep Space Nine rerun or something. And we'll watch Hamilton tonight. So I waited until the evening of the 3rd, and then we watched it. And yeah, I mean, I had listened to the soundtrack. Religiously. Like I've listened to the soundtrack backwards and forwards, and I can sing most of the songs, even now. And the show, the movie is very close to the soundtrack because almost the entire show is on the soundtrack. It's almost all songs. It's like an opera. I mean, there's almost no spoken dialogue in the whole thing. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's fantastic. And I'm not someone who likes musicals. I remember I think about this all the time. One of my friends who I met through the YouTube channel and has become kind of a pal. She messaged me, probably about 5 years ago when it was just coming out on Broadway and was, creating a lot of buzz. And she said, I know you don't like musicals, but do you think you would ever enjoy something like Hamilton? And at the time I said, nah, probably not. And then I went through this sort of phase where like the cast performed one of the numbers on the Grammy Awards. And I watched that and I was like, oh, okay. And then they did another number from the show on the Tony Awards. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever, interesting, And then I saw like the soundtrack was streaming on my music service on Amazon Music or YouTube Music or whatever I was listening to at the time. And I thought, well, what the hell? I'll just listen to the soundtrack, And 2.5 hours later, I'm like crying. I mean, it's like, it hits me so hard, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so good. And I wasn't prepared for how much it was going to affect me and how much I was going to like it. And yeah, and I've been hooked ever since. So getting to actually watch it was a big deal, because I never went to see it on stage. I never got to New York to see it on Broadway. There was one of the touring companies was in Washington D.C., which is about an hour for me, but I didn't actually go. So I mean, this was the Disney Plus version was the first time I had ever actually gotten to watch it in any form, and it's just fantastic. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. The acting is so good. I mean, the music obviously is great, but the actors are so fantastic. The acting is so subtle and invested with such emotion. I love everything about it. I mean, I just think it's terrific. It's one of my favorite things ever. I'm surprised I've only watched it once. I've only watched it once because I just haven't had time to watch it again. If I'll probably watch it again in the next couple of days.
It is a little, I mean, it is like 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And it has an intermission, but it's literally a minute.
It's a minute long.
If you want to hit the pause, you can. I mean, it gives you that break, because I actually, over the same weekend, because I just got Disney Plus, I was watching the last Avengers movie, and I watched it over like 8. I had to keep like watching 20 minutes or so at a time, because I wasn't as invested. Clearly, I was just like, I want to see what happens, because I knew what happened in Hamilton. There's just spoiler alert for that one,
right?
But the Avengers, you kind of know what happens because it gets spoiled. But yeah, I went to a book event and saw Leslie Odom talk, and that's the guy who played Aaron Burr on the show.
Yeah,
and everybody on that show who was the original cast, I think they've been with it for they haven't been with it for 5 years, because they filmed the movie version, and then most of the main people left. I think it was 2016, but they had still been doing it for at least 2-3 years.
Some of them, some of them had been there since it was on off Broadway, and I think all of the main Broadway cast that is in the movie that had been there, they were there for about a year, and then after the first year, they started to sort of leave. I know Leslie Odom Jr. and Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I think Philippa Sue all left at about the same time, and then a few of the other mains who had been there from the beginning of the Broadway run left, in the following weeks and months. But yeah, they were all together for a little over a year, I think.
But I wondered how it would be, because I listened to the Book of Mormon soundtrack a lot, and then it came to town, and I actually got to see it, and it is different. I mean, I think there's a little bit more in that was in the show that was on the musical, the soundtrack. But yeah, Hamilton, it actually was. There were emotional moments. I'm I listened to this 50 times, and just when the whole thing with his son happens, it's oh my gosh. And then the 3 duels, and the fact that dueling was such a thing, and there are more duels. If you read the book, as I have the book, there are more duels or near duels that happen during that era, and it's kind of crazy, the story itself, and to make it into this cultural phenomenon, history from the 18th century, early 19th century is kind of crazy. And I mean, sure, liberties were taken, but the thing was, somebody pointed out, and to Lin-Manuel himself, and he's it wasn't 100% historically accurate. He sure, okay, you don't like it because it doesn't, maybe not 100% historically accurate. Okay, I accept that. Yeah, and I think people should be able to do that, because if you see a biopic of any kind that isn't a documentary, even a documentary, they mess around with things. But in fiction, it's called fiction.
Well, I mean,
and a lot of the stuff literally happened. The affair has happened, but at the time it probably was more accepted. But the way they made it into the story, it really, it was well crafted. You could tell he took a long time to put it all together.
And really, most of the historical inaccuracies, I mean, most of them are things that were just smudged a little bit for expediency. The broad strokes of the story are pretty accurate. And yeah, most of the really important stuff either happened almost exactly like it's portrayed in the show, except for everybody singing, or is very, very close, or is at least based on stuff that actually happened, like even stuff that you might think was just thrown in, for a line or a punchline or something, like in the second song when when Hamilton is introducing himself to Burr, and he says, he mentions punching the bursar at Princeton. The real Hamilton didn't actually punch the bursar as far as we know, but there was like some kind of altercation between them, or some kind of dispute that kept Hamilton from attending Princeton. So even though it's exaggerated for the show and blown up into I may have punched him, it's at least based on some real incident. So yeah, the history, and look, yeah, you're right. It's not, you shouldn't go to it expecting to see literally accurate history, and that honest, and I love history. I love reading history. I love knowing what really happened, or trying to find out as best we can figure out what really happened. But when you're talking about a work of fiction, when you're talking about like an artistic work, a dramatic work, that is honestly the least important thing in the world to me. I wouldn't have like he Lin-Manuel said, because someone pointed out, about what you were saying earlier about like the Schuyler family had so many kids in real life, and in the show it's strongly implied that there's just the three daughters, and Angelica says, and yeah, exactly. And Angelica says, I'm the oldest, and so it's under pressure to me to get married, so that to bring like a man into the family, because my father had no sons. And in real life they had a bunch of kids. And Lin-Manuel Miranda was asked about that, and he said, I guess I must have just forgotten when I was writing that song. And I thought, man, you don't even have to say that. Just say you changed it. Like, just say you changed it because it worked better for the show. That's okay. Like, we know you're not writing a history lesson, you're writing a show, and it works beautifully for the show. So don't apologize. It's okay.
Yeah, and in the actual reality, like, Angelica was married when she met Alexander Hamilton, but there was real flirtation. Like, as I mentioned in the show, the letters between him and his wife were burned, so the letters between him and Angelica still exist.
Yeah.
So that's out there. You can actually check the record, which is kind of wild for something 40 years ago.
Well, because everybody wrote letters, which is ridiculous. It's like, all of these famous people, that's mostly how we know as much as we know about the founders of the United States, is because they all wrote letters to each other constantly. And because they were, big, important people, most of those letters were saved and archived. And yeah, like, you can go back and read, you can read the actual letters that Hamilton and Burr wrote to each other that led up to their ultimate duel. It's wild.
Yeah, because the duel between them happened. Now the whole part about Hamilton like shooting in the air, I don't know if that's disputed, and there was some kind of rule about dueling where you really weren't supposed to shoot in the air. You're supposed to at least aim close to the person.
Right.
But dueling itself is just, the way they did the duel, the 10 rules of dueling was great. The cabinet, becoming a rap battle between Jefferson and Hamilton was great. The way it was done, very, very creative. And so you mentioned that you preferred the George Washington as portrayed in Hamilton to the real life one.
Yeah.
Is this how we feel about all politicians, or, like how the real version is a little bit like messy? Well, a little bit messy, like I paid money to get slaves like teeth put into my skull.
Yeah.
Situation.
A little. Some of the unfortunate
Is that
details.
what you call problematic?
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because I know when I watch the show, and I know like a lot of the concerns that people have shared about the show from that perspective, and say like, even though it has a very racially diverse cast, they're all playing people who are based on real people who were all actually white. And so even with the multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial cast, you can still say that the show could be guilty of whitewashing, because it does. I mean, slavery is mentioned, and slavery is a point of contention between some of the characters, but it's not that big of a deal. And yeah, the fact that Washington was a slave owner is almost completely ignored. And you know, that's one of the things that allows the version of Washington in the show to be so admirable, because he doesn't have that baggage that the real guy has. You know, you can look at the real George Washington, and unquestionably, there are really, really admirable things about the real George Washington. But you have to deal with the fact that the dude owned slaves. And you can't just shrug that off and say, like, well, yeah, but he was a really good general and he was the first president and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you have to deal with that and acknowledge it. And in Hamilton, you don't, because, you know, it's never mentioned. And I'm very, very strongly aware of that when I watch the show. I don't feel like I'm being sold something. I don't feel like the show is telling me, you know, is trying to convince me that the real George Washington is like this. I think the show is telling me a story and is presenting a dramatized version of history that does not match the real history in a lot of ways. And it's almost poignant when I think about it, because yeah, I do wish the real George Washington was more like the guy that Christopher Jackson played in the movie, you know, on stage, when he was in the part. Like, I think he's a fantastic character. He's an admirable character. He's a powerful stage presence and screen presence now. And I wish that the real Washington was more like him. I really wish that the real Aaron Burr was more like the guy that Leslie Odom Jr. plays, because in the show, he's so much more interesting than the real guy. I mean, in the show, he becomes this tragic character where, even though he's the guy who shoots Hamilton,
sympathetic.
Yeah. You feel so bad for him, even though he's the guy who kills the title character. You think like, oh, but you know, he's so filled with regret, and he realizes too late, like his final song, you know, I should have known the world was wide enough for Hamilton and me. Like, he knows now, but it's too late. And that's just heartbreaking. And the real Burr was not like that. The real Burr doesn't seem to have been, at least not in any way that, you know, he saw fit to share with others. Like, he doesn't seem to have been all that haunted by it at all. And in the play, it's like it becomes the defining act of his life, and he seems like he's going to be haunted by it forever. And he carries the weight of, you know, of us, the modern audience, associating him with that. I mean, it really, really bothers him. And the real Burr was not like that. So, you know, that was actually one of my first sort of basic insights into the show, was like, man, this version of Burr is so much better than the real guy, you know?
Well, you get a little insight into like how people create characters and how people create kind of narratives, because there's actually a story, and I don't know if it's from the Hamilton book or not, but like somebody actually met Burr after the duel that morning, and Burr was just like totally like whatever.
Yeah.
And in the show, he's totally freaked out by it. You know, he gets a drink and all that. And then, you know, they don't get into the sequel part where he like tries to go to Mexico and like take over Mexico. And, like, he was vice president and he was like murdered somebody, and they were just like, all right, whatever. I mean, you know, kind of like, no.
It's 1800. Come on, whatever.
It's 1800. Tell your wives to vote for, or tell your husband to vote for Burr.
Vote for Burr, yeah. Well, and you know, another part is obviously there was a relationship in real life between Hamilton and Burr because it came to a duel, but the show does exaggerate the depth of their association. I mean, they you know, there are events in the show that Burr is present for in Hamilton's life that in real life he wasn't there, he had nothing to do with, but are there in the show to sort of increase their proximity to each other and create, having them have these parallel lives. And it's a little bit like what was done for Mozart and Salieri and Amadeus, where, you know, the real historical figures knew each other, and were aware of each other, and there may have been some semblance of a rivalry, sort of, but nothing like you see in the show. But and Hamilton is a similar situation where obviously they knew each other, obviously they were associates, but you know, the idea, like when Hamilton in his final song before he is shot, when he says, he refers to Burr as his first friend, and that's, you know, like he didn't meet Aaron Burr in his like first days in New York City. They didn't go back that far. They were never like super close friends. But that's how it is in the show, and it's right for the show. You know, it's completely irrelevant that that's not how it actually happened. It happened that way in the show, and it works, you know.
So to slightly change the subject to you. So I like to keep up with the Facepalm 5, and I remember checking it out and going, yeah, this is usually like 15 minutes. And then I go to YouTube and I see that the Facepalm 5 is like an hour and a half. It's like an hour and a half now. So now the Facepalm 5 is kind of like an extended director's cut with 50% more Star Trek questions.
Yes.
So this kind of dovetails into, you know, the real life we're dealing with right now, the COVID quarantine situation. You're a content creator, you do YouTube videos, so of course your life is maybe exactly the same as it was before. But it seems like now, and maybe it's just me paying more attention doing the research leading up to the show, that you're doing more kind of direct interaction with people who watch your show, like supporters. You know, you do the Patreon videos, which I should probably do. But that's about you, it's not me. Anyway, so why did you decide to kind of update? Because the Facepalm 5 used to have a different title, but you do like the 15, 20, 25-minute version, and then you just take questions from the crowd, which may have nothing to do with the 5.
Right. Usually
so
don't.
Is that something you've kind of consciously decided to do? Like, I'm going to make this live, and I'm going to just let people ask me questions after, and let it be this kind of interactive thing, you know, once you finish your script?
Yeah. I mean, the main reason behind doing it live now, honestly, is that I'm lazy. And it's I mean,
I'm with you on that. The recording live part is it's chef's kiss, right? It's
beautiful. I know, right? And well, I do it. Yeah, I mean, my YouTube career in the last several years has been an exercise in trying to find more time to do less, because I've really cut down on the number of videos that I produce, but the videos that I do produce take a lot more time to do, and to do up to what I would consider a reasonable standard of quality. And I was getting to a point in the Facepalm 5, doing it the way I did it before, where it wasn't fun to do anymore. It was becoming a chore. It was becoming, oh, I have to do this, instead of, oh boy, time to do a Facepalm 5 video. And I thought, if I can do this as a live stream and you know, do it the way I've been doing it, where the first 15, 20 minutes is basically, you know, with some changes in presentation, is basically the same thing I was doing before, and then fade out, fade back up, and then just do a post show where it's just me hanging out with people in the live chat. That would be a much more enjoyable thing for me to do, and I could still do the video, because I don't want to just it's tempting, but I don't want to just do Star Trek videos. Like, I love talking about Star Trek, I love making videos about Star Trek, it's one of my favorite things ever. But you know, I mean, Donald Trump is the president, there's a pandemic. I mean, there's people protesting in the streets for very, very important reasons, trying to draw attention to things that all of us should be worried about and trying to change. And it just feels, you know, even though I don't have a huge platform, like I do have a platform and people do tune into my videos, and it just feels wrong to be like, I'm just going to talk about Star Trek now. Good luck. So I wanted to keep doing political stuff and talk about current events, and doing the show the way I do it now allows me to do that and still be motivated to do it, you know, and not to have to treat it like, oh shit, okay, I have to come up with 5 things, I have to make graphics for it, I have to record it and edit it all together. And, you know, So it's a good compromise to allow me to continue to do it. And yeah, I've gotten used to doing it this way now, and I really enjoy it. And the first couple times I did it, people were like, what happened? It used to be a 15-minute show, and now it's like an hour. But I think now that I've been doing it for a while, people are more accustomed to it, and people who just want to see the first bit and just want to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 can watch that. And then they don't have to watch the rest of it, which is, completely fine with me. That's why I do it that way. So I just say, that's 5. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the post show. And then when I come back, if people are still there and want to talk, that's great. If people are done and they want to go get on with their lives, that's great too.
Yeah, it's a weird thing about YouTube. People don't always watch to the end. It's
no
strange. I mean, besides our shows, other people's shows, clearly. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll try a political reference. I want to ask one Star Trek related question, but I also want to ask a political question. So let's try to do 2 in 1.
Oh boy.
So using a Star Trek reference that I will not get, but your audience will love, how excited are you about voting for Joe Biden?
Oh my God, what a great question. Oh boy. How to phrase this in a way that won't sound anti-Biden, but also will express my lack of enthusiasm. As excited as I was to go see Star Trek Nemesis in movie theaters, and hopefully the Biden presidency will turn out better than that. I mean, because for fans who don't remember, Star Trek Nemesis was the last movie of the Next Generation cast, and that was after that, like Captain Picard and Commander Riker and everybody kind of were put out to pasture until now, when now they're back. But
everybody's back.
But it looked like that was going to be the end. That was their last movie, and there wasn't a lot of excitement for it, and it didn't look like it was going to be that good of a movie. And even now, like the most interesting thing about it is that Tom Hardy is in it, but it was before Tom Hardy was like a star. So it's just, at the time it was just some random guy, but now we look back and we're like, oh, Tom Hardy, this is him before he was Bane, and it's a terrible movie. I mean, it's a horrible movie. It's the worst Star Trek movie yet made, I think. But there's just not a lot of enthusiasm, but I went to see it because I felt an attachment to the franchise, and I was a Star Trek fan, and I thought, I should go see the movie. I want to see, maybe it's the last time I get to see Captain Picard. I want to go see it. And with Joe Biden, it's a similar thing. It's like he may not be the Star Trek movie I was hoping they would make, but he's the Star Trek movie that I've got, and I'm going to go see it. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, I didn't vote for him in the primary. He was probably not even my third pick. Originally I was a Warren guy, and then after Warren dropped out, I voted for Sanders in my state's primary. But Biden's the guy. There's a lot about him I wish was not so. There's a lot of things about him I wish were not part of the narrative, he's going to be the Democratic nominee, and despite my lack of enthusiasm I think he will be a perfectly acceptable president. There's going to be one of 2 outcomes to the general election. It's either going to be Donald Trump or it's going to be Joe Biden. And given those options, and those are the only realistic options, I would walk through fire to vote for Joe Biden, knowing that the alternative is 4 more years of Donald Trump. It's not even, I don't even have to think about it. I'm not conflicted about it at all. But would I rather someone else? Yeah, of course. Of course I would, but I'm still going to vote for him.
Yeah, I think we all would too. I have seen one Biden sign in my neighborhood, so watch out.
Yeah, I will say,
the wave is coming.
I will say, I think he's done well as a candidate since the COVID thing really kicked into high gear. And maybe part of that is that Trump has been doing so poorly. So just by comparison, like, I mean, but I feel like Biden has done a good job.
There's a relative aspect to it. And there's part of me is like, he's not getting a lot of attention, but that's kind of a good thing because he's going to be on the ballot either way. So
yeah, well, and
people are going to forget that he exists.
And the things that he has done, I think, have been. I think he's doing the right things, and I think he's doing very smart things. He had a couple of events in the last few weeks where he met with Black leaders, and after some brief opening remarks, it was mostly just him sitting there and listening to people. I thought that was a really, really great thing for him to do, not just because it's what all of us should be doing, but as a candidate, I thought it was very smart for him to be like, I'm going to sit here and listen, and I'm going to let people who know better than I do what the problems are tell me what they need from me. If I win this election and become president, what do they need from me? What do they want me to do? I thought that was a very smart thing for him to do. And is the exact opposite of what Trump has been doing, where, I mean, even when people do tell Trump what he needs, even when people do tell Trump what he needs to do, he willfully ignores them and does the exact opposite. So, but yeah, I mean, and like I say, I hope Biden wins the election, and I hope his presidency is not the Star Trek nemesis of presidencies. I don't think it will be. I think I think a lot of my friends who are further to the left politically than me give Biden too hard of a time. I mean, I'm not like a huge Joe Biden fan, and I do wish he was a lot more progressive than he is. And I wish he had been more progressive earlier in his career too. Like big time, especially for, most of the things that are still like weights around his neck, like the crime bill and, some of his past statements about women or about race. I mean, some of that stuff is 20 or 30 years ago, but still, like, I wish he hadn't said it. I wish he had been better back then, so we wouldn't have to deal with this now. But I don't think he'll be a bad president. And I think if you look at his campaign website and you look at his platform and you look at the things that he wants to do, most presidential candidates, when they get elected, if they win their elections, they at least try to implement some of their agenda. And if he implements some of that agenda that he has on his website, I think we'll be in good shape. Not as good of a shape as I would like us to be, but I think it's a decent, it's a step forward. Not as big of a step forward as I think we need, but it's a step forward.
Yeah, they say a journey of 1,000 miles involves the first step, and here we are trying to take the first step.
We're taking, yes, that's it.
We seem like we're moving forward and backward.
Yeah.
In crazy ways at the current moment. So, Mr. Super Content Guy, how do people find, your YouTube content and, of course, podcast content? And when are you not producing content? I mean,
I'm producing it pretty much all the time, whether I'm releasing it or not. Lately I release 1 or 2 videos a week, not counting live streams. But I'm working on them constantly. YouTube.com/Steve Shives is the big one, where you can watch my videos and see more of me than you could ever possibly imagine. And possibly want. Like, it's ridiculous. There's no way anybody would look at my YouTube channel and go, oh, thank goodness he has 2,000 videos. But youtube.com/Steve Shives. And for the podcasts, it's lemmylistenpodcasts.com. And the shows that I co-host are Late Seating and the Ensign's Log, alongside the great Jason Harding. You can search for my name on Instagram or on Twitter or Facebook, and I'm on there too. But the podcast and the YouTube channel are the big ones. If for some reason you haven't seen enough of me and you want to watch more of my stuff, that's your best bet.
And for cat yawning pictures, go to the Instagram.
Absolutely, cat and the occasional Star Trek comic made from action figures, because I do those to amuse myself in my spare time.
Copious spare time, clearly, based on all you have going on. Well, thank you for being back on. And, to quote Hamilton, can we get back to politics, please? The only time that those words have been said and you've been like relieved. Yes.
Yeah. Let's do it. What about politics? Exactly. Well, thank you for inviting me back. I had a great time.
201. Next time, he'll be wearing the red shirt. I don't know. It's not brand, but we'll go with it.
You know.